Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for a special episode of a new side podcast we're launching called The Flyover, where we're going to bring in some Eagles experts to talk about the Eagles every week. I'm joined today by a very special guest, our first international guest I've ever had on a podcast. It is Jonny Page. If you are not following him on Twitter, be sure you give him a follow at Jonny Page 9, I believe.
9 after Nick Foles.
9 after Nick Foles. I love it. He is coming to us from the UK. He's a staff writer for Bleeding Green Nation. Again, if you're not following him, give him a follow. His film work is some of the best stuff out there for the Eagles, and his written pieces are top notch. I've learned a lot from reading and following and interacting with him. So, Jonny, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Yeah, firstly, I didn't realize it was a new podcast. So first time on a new podcast is always fun. It's also been ages since I've spoke. So I've probably got a few new followers who didn't realize I was British at this point. So it doesn't take very long when you hear the accent, but I always get comments after doing something like this where people are shocked. But yeah, a little bit later in the day down here. But yeah, nice to be here. First time talking for a while. So yeah, it'd be good to talk some Eagles.
Yeah, I told my wife that I was going to do a podcast with you today, and she was like, well, does he have like a British accent? I was like, I don't know. I've never talked to him. I've never heard him speak. I just read all of his stuff. So it turns out the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I'll have to report back to her. So, all right, well, let's dive right in. I already alluded to it. Your film work is some of the greatest stuff out there. I love to go see your game threads that you put out on Twitter and the written versions you do for Bleeding Green Nation. You've gone through this offseason and you've done breakdowns of a whole lot of different players for the defense and the offense. What were some of the biggest surprises to you in your film review that you did this offseason?
Yeah, so surprises. I was trying to think, I guess, about things maybe that I didn't expect going into it. I've got a couple of things, actually. The first one might surprise a few people, but just how good AJ Brown was. And I was a fan of AJ Brown. I'm a big fantasy guy. I watched him when he came out. I really, really liked him. But he sort of surprised me in how he wins. And I think he's going to surprise a few Eagles fans as well. If you haven't read what I wrote about him, I do recommend going back and looking at it. Just because I think I expected a massive yards after the catch guy. I thought he was a bit Deebo Samuel-esque in terms of a lot of play action, a lot of slants, a lot of catch the ball and take it to the house. Actually, he was much more of a true X than I expected to see. He's way better against press than I expected. He's very much a downfield receiver, sort of your traditional X who can go up and get it in contested situations. And to be honest, he was very, very good. I mean, in my opinion, elite, like sort of top 5 level, which although I liked him on draft day, those of you that follow me might know I was a big Traylon Burks guy. So actually, I was a little bit like, oh, excited. We've got AJ Brown, but also a little bit thinking, well, did we need to pay him? Well, we could have got the other guy, which obviously, if you're reading camp reports, makes me look very stupid. But that's how it goes with the NFL draft. So, yeah, I think offensively, I'd say AJ Brown being a true X maybe was one of the biggest surprise. And then on the actual Eagles themselves, I would say maybe Jonathan Gannon. And when I say about a surprise, I'm still not particularly optimistic about Gannon, but I think he gets a bad rep for just playing sort of cover 2, cover 4 without any disguise. And I think that's a little bit unfair. So I think first half of the season, we were extremely bland. I don't think anyone can argue that. There was a lot of zone coverage. There was a lot of really simple, basic coverage with lack of disguise. But I think you have to take into consideration that this was a defense that had been cover 1 single high for a long time. And they had to transition to something new. And I think actually the defense had a lot more disguise in it. There was a lot more different coverages to the end. Just go and look at the Bucs game in the playoffs. I know it wasn't a great defensive performance, but we saw a lot of press. We saw a lot of man coverage. We even saw some sort of brackets in the red zone on Gronk and on Mike Evans. So I think Gannon being a bit more adventurous schematically, I might say, was a little bit of a surprise. When you go back and actually individually watch the players for a whole season, it gives you a different perspective. After the season, and you can see the defense sort of change and progress throughout the year, which maybe gives me a little bit more optimism that this year we might see a little bit more of that. So yeah, I think I'd say AJ Brown and maybe Gannon being more aggressive schematically would be 2 surprises that maybe people may not have thought about.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you just can't see on the broadcast view. If they would give us an all 22 view to watch live, I would never watch anything else. But it's just so hard to see the defensive structure and things like that. I really felt like Jonathan Gannon was dealt a difficult hand in that he was transitioning defenses. You know, the Jim Schwartz defense was built around the idea of having an extra guy in the box so linebackers didn't matter. And transitioning to these split field safety looks. It's where the NFL is headed, and the Eagles just simply didn't have the linebackers to do it. And so I felt like Gannon's hands were tied. This year, there's no arguing he's got better talent. And so I'm like you. I'm anxious to see where it goes. I'm not sold on Gannon, but I at least feel like he has a fighting chance this year.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I think when you look at the personnel they had, not just at linebacker, I think at even safety and corner, arguably, I think it's just the way they've been coached for a long time. That changing that whole approach, it was so different to Jim Schwartz. They couldn't be more different, really, in their approaches. I think Schwartz is very much old school. Gannon's very much, as you mentioned, this split safety look. And I think it just took a long time to even get the basics down. So my hope is that the sort of disguise and the changes we saw at the end of the year, we're going to see from week one this year. I don't really think he has any excuses this year, to be honest. I think he's got his guys pretty much. So yeah, I think that'd be really interesting to watch out from basically straight away from week one.
I do feel like this will be Jonathan Gannon's last year in Philadelphia. Supposedly he got some head coaching buzz last year. It seems to me that the defense is either going to take a huge leap and he'll get hired away, or it won't, and he probably gets fired. So it does seem like it's probably the end of the road at the end of this season for Jonathan Gannon. But we'll see. We'll see which direction that goes. Hopefully he gets hired away, not fired away.
Yeah,
we've got Matt H chiming in on YouTube, says, "Go Birds." Thank you for joining, Matt. If you guys are out there watching live, be sure and drop us some comments. We always appreciate being able to interact with you guys. So you talked about cornerbacks, Johnny. One cornerback in particular that I've been on the train for a long time was Avonte Maddox. And he had a rough start to his career. His rookie season, he was asked to play free safety, which is something he never did in the prior to the NFL. And I thought he did fine as a rookie in that role. But then his second year, he got shifted to outside corner, and he just woefully physically inadequate to play outside corner. He really settled into the slot last year. He was graded the 25th CB by Pro Football Focus last year, and he allowed a QB rating of only 91.9 when he was targeted. What do you think clicked for Avonte Maddox last year? And do you expect that to continue for him in the slot this year and moving forward?
Yeah, so I wrote about Maddox a few weeks ago, actually. So he's quite fresh in my mind. I've always really liked him. I wrote a film review on him about 2 years ago when him and Sidney Jones were competing for the outside position. And I must admit, I did argue that Maddox probably could play outside, and I probably got that slightly wrong. But if you go back and read what I said, pretty much the concerns that we saw that year were the same as what we did see. It's a size issue, isn't it, for a lot of players? I think when we talk about Gannon as well and the quarterbacks, they definitely benefited from that passive sort of system. They weren't asked to play on an island very much. So Maddox was really good. Really good. When you go back and watch him, what gets me is how aggressive he is downhill. So the way the Eagles ask him to play means that if you look at some of his numbers, he gives up a lot of catches. But that's sort of the way they ask their corners to play. As I mentioned, they don't mind giving up short catches. The one number I did find pretty incredible, which I wrote about, was he gave up 7.8 yards per reception, which is pretty much the best of any starting cornerback. I mean, outside slot, it's incredibly low. And especially when you consider how many receptions he gave up. I think that highlights how strong he is as a tackler. I think it highlights how aggressive he is coming downhill and how fluid his hips are. The only thing about Maddox, and I think the Eagles maybe got away with this a little bit last year, as much as I like him, is I think he very much suits a style of receiver. He sort of suits your traditional slot wide receiver who's quick twitch, sort of fluid hips. He likes it all underneath. I think where he can struggle is against someone who can go vertically, and in particular, bigger targets. So one thing that Gannon didn't do last year was he didn't move around his top cornerback to sort of stay with the opposing team's number one wide receiver. That wasn't something he did. And to be fair, a lot of defensive coordinators don't do this. So, for example, in the Bucs, when we played them in the playoffs, they just moved Mike Evans to the slot a lot. And the way Maddox plays, how aggressive he is, he does not suit being sort of out-muscled or out-bodied by bigger receivers. So I think my concern with Maddox will be whether other teams look at that and basically start putting bigger guys into the slot. Because the way he plays, he almost wants to win physically. He plays like a big guy, but sadly he's not. And in the old Chip Kelly phrase, big people often beat little people. And when Maddox is faced against like a 6'4", 6'5" receiver in the slot, which we do see more teams do now, the so-called big slot, you can look at someone like Zach Pascal, for example, that Eagle has signed. I think that's where they can get after him. So I don't think he's a perfect slot corner by any means. But I think he's very, very good. And I'm really glad he got a new contract. I think he deserved it. I really like watching him play in man coverage and zone coverage. You can sort of do it all. That's my only concern with him, really. Is that he will get beat by bigger receivers. And I think we just have to accept that. But overall, I see no reason why it can't continue. If anything, the Eagles defense as a whole might be slightly better next year, which, if anything, will only benefit him more. So I see no reason why he can't have another very, very successful year.
Yeah, I really like his ability to rally and tackle. I think it's one of his best traits, especially when you're starting to look at more of these cover two style defenses. Being able to give up those short throws and then rally and tackle is so key, and that's one of the things that I think Maddox really shines on. So I'm excited for him. I thought he was going to have a big year in the slot last year. I do expect that to continue, but that is a concern that I share as well. Is what do you do with when the Bucks put Mike Evans in the slot? How are you going to defend that? I want to see Gannon come up with some answers to those questions this year. So, you're muted there, Johnny.
There we go. Much better.
There we go.
It is very difficult when you get sort of big receivers in the slot. So it's not really a problem with Maddox. It's more an issue with, I guess, the way Gannon uses his cornerbacks in general. But I don't really think there's much you can do about that, to be honest. It's not a big concern. It's not a huge concern. I think overall I was so happy, as I mentioned, he got a chance to play inside last year, because sticking him outside for a whole year in that Schwartz-style defense was pretty harsh. And I'm glad the Eagles kept him and have tried to make it work, because I think they'll get the benefits now. I think he'll have another solid year.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's flip back to the offensive side of the ball now. Last year, the Eagles offense shifted dramatically from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. You dug these numbers up in one of your articles. Through the first 7 weeks, the Eagles passed the ball on 61% of their plays. And then from weeks 8 through, 17 now? The 18, the extra week throws me off. They ran the ball 61% of the time. So we went from extremely pass heavy to extremely run heavy, but then we added 2 receivers this offseason. So what do you expect from the Eagles offense this year?
I'm obviously biased because I'm an Eagles fan, but I think the Eagles offense is the most fascinating sort of thing to talk about in the NFL right now. What they did last year is unheard of, and I think fans sort of just accept it because it was obvious in many ways. It was obvious. Really good offensive line, good running backs, really good mobile quarterback, so run the ball. But coaches just don't do it. It doesn't happen in the modern NFL. I mentioned they were 61%. To put that into context, the next highest team was the Saints, and they ran at 49%. I mean, it's pretty much unheard of. In the league in 2021 or 2022, whatever, to run 61% is unheard of. So I'm fascinated to see what we do. My gut tells me that is completely unsustainable. My gut feeling is you cannot run at 61%. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the Eagles' run game is simply that good, but my gut tells me that they won't do that again. I have a slight concern still that they're going to go too pass heavy, and I'll touch on this in a minute exactly about what I mean. But the reason why I'm worried about them going too pass heavy is the obvious. Look at their receiving core. It's probably the best they've had in years. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert is extremely good. I mean, it might be top in terms of a top 3 sort of receiving talent. So they're not going to run the ball that much when you've got those 3. And the other worry I have, and I tweeted about this the other day, that I don't see a clear running back with a high touch. So personally, I'd bring back Jordan Howard. I really wanted him to get an aggressive running back because I feel like the offensive line is so nasty, and a really aggressive runner would suit it. I don't really see a high touch or a high volume player. Sanders to me is a 1B or a 2 rather than sort of a foundation back. Gainwell and Scott are fine, but again, for me, they're receiving backs who can run, not sort of running backs in the traditional sense. So it looks to me like they might go a little bit pass heavy. And what scares me a little bit is I really care about the percentages, 61%, 55%, 50%, who cares? The key is that you have to lead with the running game, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is most defenses you're going to go up against this year, or probably a lot of them, are going to play a lot more split safety, cover 4 or quarters, whatever you want to call it. And you want to run to force them into single high. So you want to start with a running game. And then once you force them into single high, then by all means throw. Because what you do is you've obviously basically eliminated a deep defender. You've opened up more predictable coverages. You probably know you're going to get cover 1 and cover 3. It's easier reads to Jalen Hurts. Play action's obviously going to be more effective. There are less disguises that a defense can do when you've got a safety sitting in the box. So for me, I don't really care about percentages. If every team's going to play single high and stick 8 men in the box all the time, then throw the ball 70% of the time. So I'm not the kind of person on Twitter to tweet hashtag run the ball and get really angry. I want them to do it based on the defensive scheme. And if they start by throwing the ball, if they lead with the sort of passing game and trying to get Hurts and AJ Brown and Smith into a sort of different style of offense, my worry is they're going to see more disguise. They're going to see more quarters. It's going to be harder for them to throw the ball. So for me, percentages don't care. I'm really hoping they're going to lead with the running game. And as I said, if that forces a defense to single high, that safety comes in the box, then start throwing because you've got more predictable coverage. It's easier on Hurts. But I want them to lead with a running game. And I know AJ Brown's brilliant. I know Devontae Smith is as well. But I still think with Jalen Hurts as your quarterback, and I might be wrong on that, I don't want him to lead the offense as a passer. So I think they're going to go a little bit more pass heavy. I would love them to stay run heavy, but in my opinion, 61% is not happening again. That's pretty insane in this league. So even if they're winning games, even if they're a decent side, I don't see 61% as a realistic percentage again.
Yeah, and I think you saw what happened when they ran into good teams, like the Buccaneers in the playoffs, who just stacked the box on you. It just wasn't sustainable. Their running game really is a credit to the offensive line and to Jeff Stoutland. Because, like you mentioned, you view Miles Sanders as a 1B sort of back at 2. I am not high on Miles Sanders. I honestly never have been. I remember being disappointed when the Eagles drafted Sanders in the second round there. We won't talk about who I wanted them to draft instead, but it wasn't Sanders. So they don't have an elite running back. They do have a very, very good elite offensive line, but what Jeff Stoutland is able to do as the run game coordinator, some of the concepts that he is able to put together, it's just incredible. And I'm with you, 61% I don't think is sustainable. I think teams are going to key in on that. And if I'm a opposing defensive coordinator right now, my thought is that I want to make Jalen Hurts beat you with his arm. And if you're the offense and the defense is giving you that, like you said, then by all means throw the ball. I don't want to force something to meet a ratio. I want to do what makes sense. And I think what makes sense, like you said, is you run the ball until the defense starts to take that away and let it open up the passing game.
Yeah, I think the other thing on that as well is that for all of whatever you think about Nick Sirianni, he seems to care about numbers a lot. So I spoke about him talking about motion the other day, but he seems to basically not have a real philosophy. And I'm not criticizing him for that. He's not a Kyle Shanahan. He's not a Sean McVay. He's not someone who's coming in like, this is what I've been hired to run. He's basically going to run whatever he thinks. And obviously he has plays he likes and he has a certain way of playing. But he pretty much seems like he's going to change the offense of the players he has. So if you look at that Eagles team right now, there is a tendency to think we could throw the ball because you look at the trio of receivers, as I mentioned, not even including people like Quez Watkins, who's also very dangerous. So I think Sirianni does care about numbers. I think he does want to be balanced. And I imagine when they got at the end of the year and they looked at that number and they saw 61% run and they saw the next highest at 49%, I would not be surprised at all if, as a coaching staff led by Sirianni, they made a consensus decision not to do that again. So I do expect them, rightly or wrongly, to throw more. As I mentioned, the key for me, the big thing is leading with the running game, building the offense off the running game rather than the other way around. That matters far more to me than percentages or numbers or whatever.
Absolutely. And we are talking here with Jonny Page from Bleeding Green Nation, staff writer for BGN. Give him a follow on Twitter at JonnyPage9. Check out his film breakdowns. He puts one out every week, and it is always top-notch stuff. So, Jonny, sticking with the offense here, and you brought up Nick Sirianni. What can Nick Sirianni do schematically to help Hurts take a leap this year? You already mentioned motion a little bit, if you want to talk about that, and maybe some other things that you would do if you're Sirianni to try to help out Hurts.
Yeah, so motion's an interesting one. I get a bit annoyed with the motion discussion, to be honest, because you see people like, I won't call out names, but you get certain people on Twitter who will basically look at the list of who's doing the motion the most and say, oh, there you go, motion equals really good. And there are obviously other ways to win. And I remember reading about Peyton Manning, for example, probably the smartest or one of, if not the smartest quarterbacks of all time, speaking about how he didn't like motion because it changed defense before the snap. And actually, he was pretty happy leaving the defense as it was. He didn't want to see a change. So the idea that motion's good or bad is not ideal. It's a silly discussion. The way I look at it is, why are you using it? So, for example, I keep going back to the Bucs game, but it was such a bad game for the Eagles offense. I love Devontae Smith as much as everyone. He couldn't get off press coverage that game. If you go back and watch it with 22, he really struggled. The Bucks have got some very good cornerbacks, and he struggled to get off press coverage. So in that situation, what I'd like Sirianni to do is to use motion to help a receiver get off press coverage. It's not a weakness. It doesn't make him bad. Lots of players have needed free releases to succeed. But it's just a way of helping your receivers get open, which will also, in turn, help Jalen Hurts. I think the big thing for Jalen Hurts, and this to me is basically it. I've never been a huge fan of his arm. I think he's got an average arm. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's below par. It's not a Josh Allen, Justin Herbert type arm. It's not a top 5 arm. But what is absolutely huge for him is, can he sit in the pocket and deliver? Because we know he bows from empty pockets. We know he's a bit of a 1 or 2 read guy, and then his first instinct is to get out. And unfortunately, it really came up in the Bucks game where, and actually, I think JT O'Sullivan, the QB school, just literally did a video about this last week. But for anyone like Eagles fans, we probably knew this because I wrote about it 6 months ago. But he wasn't happy in the pocket, and he bailed early and didn't trust his protection. And the NFL's changing. Making plays outside of structure is way more important than it used to be. You don't want your old school Phillip Rivers, Drew Brees sitting in the pocket who can't move. But you're going to be in 3rd and long in this league. And when you're in 3rd and long, you're going to have to throw the ball. You're not going to be able to convert by running very often. He's going to have to hit his back foot, and he's going to have to stay in the pocket and maybe stay an extra second if no one's open, and then rip it. And it could be the middle of the field as well. So he needs to learn to really get comfortable in the pocket, and things Sirianni can do to help him. So if I'm looking at Sirianni, I think obviously the quarterback and coach sort of a pair together. Firstly, if he's not comfortable in the pocket, despite what I just said, try and use a few more concepts to get him on the move. So don't be afraid to run a bit of boot action or getting him outside the pocket. Give him as easy reads as possible. So what kind of concepts can you use? Funny enough, in preseason, we saw 2 of my favorite concepts, 2-man concepts. You've got dagger, a very simple vertical route, and an underneath route, essentially from like a deep in underneath it. All you've got to do then is read the deep safety and see what's happening sort of man or zone coverage wise. And then they ran scissors on the touchdowns. Dallas got it. AJ Brown running a post. Dallas got it running a corner. Again, all you're doing there is reading sort of the outside corner and the safety who you hope are going to take the post. And then you've got to just make sure you ignore the flat defender. So there are things that Sirianni can do. So a lot of 2-man concepts, half-field read, more play action. I spoke about in the article recently that Hurts was very good off of play action as well. But to be honest, a lot of it does go down to Hurts being able to hit his back foot and getting rid of the ball. Because Sirianni's obviously he's a head coach. He knows how to call up concepts. Some of his concepts last year weren't brilliant in terms of scheming up the drop and sort of as in getting the ball out on time. But sometimes you wonder if that's Hurts as well, being late rather than a fault with Sirianni. So it sort of works both ways. There's definitely things Sirianni can do to help him. But there are certain parts of just being a quarterback that he has to get slightly better on. And I think the big one for me, the really, really big thing, and as somebody who I think is fair to say has not been his biggest believer, if I see him on 3rd down, sit in the pocket, maybe stay an extra half second or get the ball out on time in the middle of the field. But I think the rest of it, he's okay. He doesn't throw many interceptions. His arm's good enough. His mobility is obviously exceptional. So that one thing, if we can see him eliminate what's not there quicker, that will mean when he hits his back foot, he already is isolated where he wants to go with the ball, and then trust it. Get rid of it. He's got to trust his eyes when he sees it, because too many times we've seen him look at something and not throw it. And if you're looking at it, it's too late. You've got to know it's going to be open before it comes open in this league. The windows are not big enough to be able to sit there and stare at it and then throw it. You have to be able to read it in advance. And going into his 3rd year, and I wrote about this actually last week, he's had very good coaches for his whole career. He's obviously come from Alabama with some extremely good quarterback coaches. He's thrown the ball a lot. If he doesn't get it this year, then I realistically don't see it changing. That's a 2nd year in an offense. It's a 3rd year in the league. He's been around some very good coaches in his time. If it doesn't happen this year and he still bows early from pockets and he doesn't look comfortable reading the field, then I think it's fair to say that's just not something he's going to do moving forward. And I think, unfortunately, that caps him as really a top maybe 15 at best quarterback in between that 12 and 15 range, which is still very good. But depending on what you want, if you want an elite quarterback, because that's what you think you need to do in order to win, then he needs to be able to deliver on 3rd and long, hit his back foot, release the ball. Yeah, probably quite a lot there. As you can tell, there's a few things I still want to see from Hurts. It's not all negative, as I mentioned. He had a pretty good year last year overall. But I think he has to be able to do a few of those things this year, or I imagine the Eagles will look to move on.
Yeah, I've said before that Jalen Hurts is solidly in that tier of quarterbacks you can win with for me. He's not a quarterback you win because of. While he's on a rookie deal, the Eagles could win a Super Bowl with him. I'm not saying they're going to win a Super Bowl this year, but while he's on a rookie deal, you can make the aggressive moves for A.J. Brown, for James Bradbury, that sort of thing. Once you have to open up the checkbook, no, I don't know, nobody uses a checkbook. Once you have to open up the bank account and pay Jalen Hurts 20% of your salary cap, which is what starting quarterbacks command on those second deals, he has to be able to cover deficiencies on the roster that his contract creates. And Jalen Hurts hasn't shown that he could do that to me yet. That doesn't mean he won't, but he hasn't yet. And you talked about, hitting that back foot and throwing, getting the ball out. And that's something we need to see. We need to see throwing over the middle of the field. He's really good at throwing those outbreakers off of scissors, off of smash concepts. I think A.J. Brown could really thrive running that dagger route this year. And I don't know if it's fair to say that Hurts can't throw over the middle. It's fair to say he hasn't done it, but you look at how the Eagles roster has been constructed. You have Devonta Smith, he's a small guy. He's not a guy that's going to thrive running over the middle of the field. You have Quez Watkins as a deep threat. Dallas Goedert runs all these outbreaking routes. They haven't really had someone to ask him to throw to over the middle. They went and they got A.J. Brown, and I view A.J. Brown as an elite receiver over the middle of the field. If Hurts doesn't show that this year, then I just don't think it's in his repertoire, like you said.
Yeah, and I think on that, there's always the big discussion about, is it Sirianni not calling plays over the middle of the field, or is it Hurts? And I mean, we have to try and be logical here. And most of the time, the way I look at the league is that I trust coaches to do the right thing. And it doesn't mean I'm always right, because there are some very bad coaches. But most of the time, if the coordinator or the head coach or the offensive coordinator are not calling a lot of throws over the middle of the field, well, you tell me why that is, because it's a third of the field, basically. So if they're not doing it, there's probably a reason why. And the reason why is obviously they don't think the quarterback can do it. So I think this year the training wheels will have to come off, because you can't sign A.J. Brown and just make him run outside with Devonta Smith. You've now got Dallas Goedert, who's a very, very good, if not top 3, top 5 tight end in this league. And you've got one of the top 5 receivers, in my opinion, who, as you mentioned, is extremely physical, can hold on to the ball. Even Zach Pascal, who will get snaps, will catch the ball in the middle of the field and will hold on to it. You cannot just ignore a third of the field and expect to be an elite offense, even if the running game is as good as it has been. So, yeah, whenever there's that thing about why isn't he throwing it there, I think you have to blame the quarterback on that. I don't really see any other way logically, unless you think the coaching staff are philosophically opposed to using a third of the field, which, in my opinion, just doesn't seem very likely. It's probably that they're calling plays. And we've seen this as well with quarterbacks like Russell Wilson, slightly smaller quarterbacks. They do excel on the outside because it's easier. Because we're watching it from above angles from a huge camera. If you go out there on the field and you've got 2 6'5" offensive linemen and defensive linemen charging at you, it's a little bit easier to shift a little bit to your right and have a free like sort of vision with no one in your way. And it does lend itself. And to be fair, he was excellent, as you mentioned, on those smash routes, on those out routes that Dallas got it last year. He was very, very good at that. So if he can get that middle of the field throw down, then he's really got it all, because his vertical passing is outside the numbers. His touch is normally pretty solid. So it's a big thing. It's not a small thing. But if he does that one thing well, and I time it up with throwing on time, because middle of the field throws have to be on time. When you see, if you go and watch most scramble drills, where does the ball end up going on extended plays? Like the Quez Watkins pass, actually, from the first preseason game, they go out wide because players run to the sideline. That's where the gaps are. When you see these big extended plays, they're often down the field or outside. They're rarely bang in the middle of the field, especially because the quarterback's obviously rolling right or left. So players will follow him to make it an easier throw. So if you want to hit the middle of the field, it has to be in time, which means you hit your back foot, the ball comes out on time, because those windows are small. So it's sort of a lot of things in one. But if he's hitting the middle of the field consistently, I think we can safely say he's reading coverage better. He's getting the ball out on time better. That means he's probably more comfortable in the pocket. So for me, it's like everything. If he can do that one thing well, I think it means he's doing a lot of other little things well. And that means we might actually have a quarterback who's worth paying. Because just very quickly, you mentioned it there. You can't ignore the Hurts discussion after this year about talking about contract, because he's not going to be on the rookie deal, because he's going to want to do contracts after this year. I'm pretty sure after this year, it will be when he's viable for a increase. So then you have to make a decision. Do you pay him top dollar or do you let him go? Because there's no really in between in the NFL. Look at Kirk Cousins. He's the ultimate in between quarterback. Look how much he's got paid, because at the end of the day, you pay top dollar or you don't keep the guy. So I think when we're talking about Hurts, some of us might feel like we're pretty harsh, but I feel like we're just being realistic, or I am anyway. is that if he was a rookie last year and he had 2-3 years left, I'd be saying it'd be mental to draft a quarterback. You build around that for 3 years. But that's what happens when you take a second round pick. You lose his first year. He's also eligible for a contract a little bit earlier, going in the second round. So he's already into now, sort of make it or break it year. It's really the final one on that rookie deal. So that's the big thing I want to see from him.
All right. Let's flip back over to the defensive side now. So last year, the Eagles defense struggled very visibly against good quarterbacks. They allowed absurd completion percentages, had a couple 80%, some 75s. It was just not good, it seemed like, anytime they faced a good quarterback. This year, they've added a lot of talent. Jordan Davis on the interior defensive line, Kazir White, Hassan Reddick, Nakobe Dean at linebacker, James Bradbury at cornerback. Which of those additions do you think makes the biggest impact, and what do you expect to see from the Eagles defense this season?
Right, I could go off on the Eagles defense as well for ages because, like the offense, they're really interesting. Linebacker talent is massive. I mean, all of those players are big additions. I think James Bradbury might be the least, I guess, most impactful because he's a good cornerback. But that's really all he is. But some of the other additions are going to be huge. So the obvious answer is Jordan Davis. He's going to have an absolutely massive, massive impact on this defense because you're going to allow them to line up in different fronts. You're going to see a lot of 5-man fronts, and you're going to see a lot of Hassan Reddick and someone else on the other side, whoever that may be. Josh Sweat, more than likely. And I'm actually going to write about the defense either this week or next week. But I've been looking a lot at what the Eagles were doing last year. And I have a quick question for you, actually. I'll see if you can guess, because this is part of the thing that's going to go in the article. Gannon gets a lot of rubbish, shall we say, a lot of criticism, rightly so, for giving up a high amount of percentage of completions. But in terms of explosive pass plays allowed, which I think counts as 20-plus yards or whatever, where do you think the Eagles ranked last year?
I would say they were at least in the bottom 5 in terms of least explosive play rate.
Yeah, they were the best. They were the best.
Yeah,
they were the single best defense at giving up explosive pass plays. I think they had about 39. And by the way, they were 5th best in run as well. So unlike the Los Angeles Chargers, who you saw Brandon Staley try and do this split safety thing that he does, and it just didn't work in LA because they could not stop the run, the Eagles actually didn't get gashed by the run or the pass. So the boring answer, and people are going to hate me for this, is the Eagles are going to continue to allow a higher percentage of completions. That's my opinion. Because I think Gannon naturally is conservative on the back end. He's the anti-Jim Schwartz. His aim is to prevent you getting big plays. And to be fair to him, the Eagles were literally the best in the league at this last year. And I think if you ask most people how you win in the modern league, you say explosive pass plays. So by its nature, if you're giving up less explosive pass plays, you think that's good. The problem was they were too easy. There's a limit between being conservative and being outright passive and boring and predictable. So I expect a really conservative back end this year. I don't expect that to change. I think there's going to be a lot of split safety. There's going to be a lot of quarters. You're going to see Slay lining up 10 yards deep on 3rd and 5 and giving up a 7-yard catch. And everyone's going to shout and smash their computer screens and everything and whatever. And trust me, I've been there and done that last year. You're going to see a lot of differences. But what the Eagles should be this year, and this to me is absolutely key, is they should be unpredictable in both ends. They should be unpredictable in the back end. So we should see safety rotation all the time. I don't want to see middle field close pre-snap and then middle field close post-snap. Mix it up. The whole point of doing this split safety thing is that it allows you to do everything. You can play single high, you can play quarters, you can play quarter half, you can move it around easily. And the other big thing that we just barely saw last year at all was there has to be more pressure concepts, sim pressures, whatever you want to call them. And by the way, that doesn't have to be aggressive. In the modern league, I wouldn't do a lot of all-out blitzes with 7 rushing because I think you're asking to give up a lot of big plays. You can rush 4. You maybe rush 5 occasionally. But the idea of, well, Gannon doesn't blitz, therefore he's boring. You don't have to blitz. Don't worry about blitzing. You can rush 4, but it has to be unpredictable. If you imagine a Eagles front next year or a up 5-man front or something, and you've got Reddick on one side, Sweat on the other, Reddick will drop. And people will get annoyed about it, and I'll get annoyed about it because he's not great in coverage. But you have to have that because you don't want to be predictable. Look at the linebackers they've just added with Nakobe Dean. He's one of the best blitzers basically in college last year. You will use him on rushing the quarterback, but don't make it predictable. We can't just come in on 3rd down and rush. It gets easy. So for me, it's all about unpredictability next year for the Eagles. I do expect them to be conservative. I don't think that will change. Don't expect a bunch of single high press man coverage, Jim Schwartz style. It's not going to happen. If you watch every interview, and I watched loads of them when we hired Gannon, when you go and listen to what he talks about, He talks all the time about not giving up big plays. That is his philosophy. He does not want to get beat deep. That means he won't play with 8 men in the box all the time like Schwartz. He would rather give up 5 yards a pop in the run game and give up less big plays. And it will be frustrating when you play against like the Tom Brady's who can dink and dunk. But a lot of modern quarterbacks don't play that well. They get frustrated. They want to take the deep shot. You almost bait them into it. You keep giving them 6-7 yards. And you know what? It's hard to walk down the field, 7-yard pass, 4-yard run, 7-yard pass. If you've got 85 yards to go or something, it's easy to make a mistake. It's not that easy. One bad play, and all of a sudden you're 2nd and 12 or something, and then it gets difficult. So I think the Eagles defense will be conservative. But for me, the big additions, like Jordan Davis, you mentioned, he's going to do a huge amount because very basic terms. Football's a really complicated game, but it's also incredibly simple. It's a numbers game. So teams are going to think, oh, the Eagles have got 2 safeties deep. We'll run the ball. But they might not take into consideration, but Jordan Davis literally is the size of 2 normal people. And he plays like that as well. Kaiser White is going to allow you to do a lot more things in coverage. I was really impressed by his tape going back and watched. And you saw him get the pick, albeit I didn't even break that pick down because I've got no idea what Zach Wilson was doing. And if I'm a Jets fan, good luck, because that was about as obvious as a read as all time for a linebacker. I might fancy myself if I was playing with a linebacker getting that one as well, to be fair. But Reddick, Dean, Jordan Davis, they all just allow the Eagles to do more. They all just make the Eagles defense more unpredictable. And basically, if you're going to be a conservative defense, you have to do it in an unpredictable nature. You have to at least make the quarterback think, who's actually coming on this play? And you know what? If that means dropping out a few players, if you play a few different fronts, even if you've got someone like Josh Sweat, you can make him have his hand in the dirt and then he can drop backwards. You can do things like that. You can mix it up. And what that still does is it enables you to keep 7 men in coverage, which means you can still be safe on the back end. I think Jordan Davis, honestly, is the key to being able to do that, because if they can't stop the run and then they have to bring a safety down into the box, then it all changes what they want to do. So a bit of a long ramble there, as you'll probably realise by now I like to do. But that's where I'm looking at massively, is being unpredictable. Whatever they do is going to be conservative because that's who Gannon is by nature. So you're not going to see many 7-man blitzes. You're not going to get that. You might do that on Madden all the time, but we're not going to do it a lot next year. It's not going to happen. So you've got to work around that then and confuse quarterbacks. Because what we saw last year was it was too easy. People like Justin Herbert just literally turned up, saw cover 4, knew exactly what to do. Post snap is exactly the same. Done. Quarterbacks are too smart these days. You have to mix it up. Otherwise, they will pretty much complete a ridiculous amount of passes, just like they did last year.
Yeah, simulated pressures is something I want to see a lot of this year. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't use them. Why would you not want to rush 6 guys but still have 7 coverage? Because actually 2 of those guys didn't rush, and you make the offense second guess. So that's something like the Ravens use a lot of sim pressure. That's always something that's fun for me to watch defensively. I'm really hoping we see that some from Gannon this year.
It's the big thing. So sorry, just quickly, one more thing on sim pressures as well. One thing around the league that I think you're going to see next year, because it was a trend towards the end of last year, is do it on first down. Mm-hmm. If you're going to get these offenses now that are pass heavy, and I think you know what the league's like, it goes in cycles. We might actually see more run heavy approaches next year early on. But if you're getting teams that are just going to come out there and throw and have no running game, then go sim pressures on first down. Don't wait till 3rd and 12. Run it early. Because if you get a team that just literally wants to throw the ball every time and there's no running game that you haven't got to respect, so they've got an average running back, you know they're going to come out and throw the ball 70% of the time. Don't respect the run. Run sim pressures on first down. If you can get a sack and then they're 2nd and 16, then you can go conservative. Give up 2 6-yard passes and they're punting. So for me, it's not just about doing it on 3rd down. Anyone can run a fancy blitz on 3rd and 15. I mean, it's not that hard to go, oh, we're going to do this great pressure on 3rd and 15 or whatever. I mean, that's easy. Every defensive coordinator can run that stuff because that's the time to do it. If you really want to confuse offenses, run it on 1st and 10. Don't be afraid to be aggressive early on. I know that goes against what Gannon wants to do, but I would love to see that next year as well. And again, they're sim pressures. If they do run on you and you give up a short gain, well, you live with it as long as you can stop the big gains. And similarly, if you run it on early downs, you obviously have a much bigger chance of turnovers and stuff because quarterbacks maybe are less likely to expect it. They will be less likely to take a sack as it's first down, whereas sometimes on 3rd and long, they can just sort of try and run around and get what they can. So you increase your chances of turnovers as well, running it on early downs. So sim pressures, early downs is something I'd like to see as well, especially against those modern offenses who just want to throw the ball. Take advantage of it. If teams haven't got a proper run game that you don't need to respect, then don't respect it. Play the pass on first down and take a risk. That's something I'd like to see next year as well.
All right. So we're one preseason game in, and obviously you can't take away much from vanilla preseason games. But what was your biggest takeaway from the Eagles' first game against the Jets?
Yeah, it was seriously vanilla, wasn't it? I mean, I'll be honest, as a UK and England boy, I watched the preseason games afterwards, and they're even more boring on repeat, especially when you're trying to write an article about it. The second half was great to have football back, but by the second half, I was slightly bored at some parts. The people who managed to get me happy throughout the game, I mean, I won't go into massively on defense because I think everyone has spoke about them. Jordan Davis and the Kobe Dean. What I think is interesting is I do sometimes think you get players that suit each other. And I think the Kobe Dean being slightly undersized and Jordan Davis being absolutely massive is not like a freak why they pair up well together. They do suit each other really well because you're going to get Davis, you're going to take on more blockers. And even when an offensive lineman can climb to the second level, he probably has to spend a little bit longer on Jordan Davis than he does on your normal defensive tackle. That gives Dean half a second more time to sort of get to the running back as well. So I think those two in tandem just look really fun. That'll be my main message. And then the second one was, and if you've read my article this week, you'll know me go mad about him, was just Cam Jurgens. I mean, I know Ross Tucker was sort of laughing, saying he's Jason Kelsey, but he literally was that game. Now, obviously, it's not a proper game. It was a pretty vanilla defense. It was easy, but he is so athletic. And I wrote about him in the offseason and really liked what I saw. But I said he's going to struggle to anchor. He will get beat at times. I know Jeff Stoutland is a bit of a genius, but he didn't struggle with that at all. He looked very good at pretty much everything he did, and his athleticism is outrageous. Those pinball concepts, those sweet runs that the Eagles love, it's pretty incredible to watch how seamlessly. No one wants to see the end of Jason Kelsey. We've loved him for absolutely ages, but it will definitely soften the blow knowing that Cam Jurgens is going to be up next, because I thought that was about as good as a debut for an offensive lineman as you could pretty much have. To be honest, I didn't take away much else. I don't look a lot schematically at preseason. Hurst looked very comfortable, as I'd expect him to in that offense. The receivers look good, Goddard looked good. But yeah, for me, it was Jurgens on offense and Davis and Dean on defense. Nothing else massively stood out for me. But yeah, Cam Jurgens was seriously fun, which is hard to be for an offensive lineman sometimes in your first game.
Nobody loves offensive linemen like Philly fans. I feel like it feels kind of like it did with the Colts when they have Peyton Manning for 15 years and then like he's gone and they go right into Andrew Luck. That's kind of the vibe I get with Jason Kelsey handing the torch off to Cam Jurgens. Just he's just the same sort of player Jason Kelsey liked. See him out sealing edges, out pulling. It's just so much fun to watch the way that Stoutland gets his centers who are athletic, gets them out moving in space. It's always fun watching a center like pancake a slot corner. So, okay, let's flip on to 2022 here. What is your official prediction for the 2022 Eagles? Give me your record prediction. How's this season going to play out?
So for anyone that's followed me for a while, I hate this stuff. If you scroll through my Twitter, and I'm not lying, go and look through my Twitter, you will never find an official prediction ever. I never do one. I don't do game breakdowns. I don't read any of them. I don't know who we're playing this year in the schedule. I'm not that kind of fan. So you managed to drag one out of me this year. It's the only time you'll ever. It's an exclusive. My gut tells me about the season, and this is I'm not breaking down the schedule and looking at each game, by the way, so don't go betting on this. But I would guess we're about an 11-win team. Overall, if I had to make a serious prediction, I would, as I said, I'll say about 11-6. I think we'll be neck and neck with the Cowboys. I don't know who's going to win the division. I think it will be between us two. I think sadly they are good. How good, I don't know. I don't think they're as good as they once were, or they had the chance to be very good the last couple of years with their roster, but decided to hire a very average coach, which is probably a good thing for us during their sort of most or their best time in terms of talent. So I think we'll be neck and neck with them. I think losing Cooper for them and adding AJ Brown for us is big. We'll see how much he can handle this year. I think we'll be close enough, and I think we'll be better than last year in terms of I can see us winning a wild card game. But if I'm being honest, I still don't think we have the firepower to win in a top shootout against like a very top quarterback. The good news is the NFC is weak. So I would not take the Eagles against teams like the Chargers, Chiefs, Ravens, those really high-powered offenses. But we haven't really got many in the NFC. So I think we're a playoff team, and I think we should be good enough to get past the first round. But again, if we're on the road to the Bucks again in the first round, then maybe not. But I think we should be better than last year. Divisional round, maybe even a conference if things go really well. But But I think we'll be good. I think between 10 and 12 wins, probably 11 if I'm being boring and picking straight down the middle. And that's the only prediction anyone's going to get out of me. And I reserve the right to change that as well. And I promise you, if you go back through my Twitter, I've been on Twitter a long time. I don't think I've ever put a prediction out. So there you go. An exclusive for the pod.
Exclusive right here. The trick to making predictions that you don't want anybody to hold them to is to drop them at minute 45 of a podcast.
Great shout.
You put it on Twitter, people can go search. You put it in your articles, people can go search those on BGN. You can't search a podcast or a video, and no one's ever going to find it again, except for you. If you hit it right on the nose, then you go tweet the clip later, and it blows up. It's great.
Yeah, 100% I'm doing that. If we go 11-6, you will see this clip again, no doubt.
My favorite one of those I did was I was on a draft show about 30 minutes before the draft, a radio show, and they asked me what the Eagles were going to do in the draft, and I said they were going to trade up to 13 and snipe the Ravens for Jordan Davis, and that Eagles fans were going to be mad about it, but they shouldn't be. And then a couple hours later on our show, that happened, and everybody that I was on the show with was mad about it except for me, and I was like, let's go. And so I went and tweeted that one back out later. But
yeah, you got to do that.
All right, well, I'm going to see if I can drag one more prediction out of you here. We've talked extensively about Jalen Hurts, what he needs to do to prove he's worthy of that second contract, which he does have one more year on that deal after this year, but the Eagles are positioned with 2 first-round picks next year. If they're going to make a move, this offseason is probably the time that they do it. So I'm going to ask you, will Jalen Hurts be the 2023 starter for the Eagles?
Yeah, once again, my favorite kind of question, so thank you. I'm going to be really boring and not. I won't go down the middle. I'll say about 65% chance no. Somewhere in that 60-70% chance range of no. I think Hurts can have a very good year and he could be a top 12 quarterback. I just think knowing what we have known over the years about Howie Roseman, about the way the Eagles organization views the position, they think that is what you need to do to win. And obviously, a lot of things go into this. If the Saints play really well this year, and by the way, I think the Saints could, and that first-round pick is high, in the 20s, and the Eagles' first-round pick's in the 20s, then maybe he will be the starter again, because obviously it depends on who else you can get. But I think looking at who's coming out next year, and I'm not a big college guy until next year, but obviously I've done the usual reading of who's looking like they're going to come out, and I've read sort of 4 or 5 first-round QBs. If the Eagles get knocked out of the playoffs in a similar way, I think Hurts will take a step forward. But I think he should, because this is a seriously good offense. If you look at the talent around him, if you put most quarterbacks on this with this offensive line, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, if he's not playing well, I'd be worried. I think no, based on the way the Eagles see the position. The only thing that I think goes in Hurts' favour that pushes me towards a 60%, because I think on talent alone, I'm more 80% that he won't be the starter, is just what he's like as a character. And the fact that Sirianni kept him his first year, it could be that he's just so popular in the dressing room. He's such a big figure that the Eagles don't necessarily want to move him on. And maybe they let him play out another year and then he goes for free to another team. It's an easier way to sell to the players by saying, listen, we tried to keep him. It didn't happen money-wise. I don't know. I think he's almost too popular to stay as a backup. So I think if you get another one, you almost have to move him on. And that's the only thing that sort of the real thing that keeps me believing is what he's like as a person and what everyone says about him. If he had just a tiny bit more talent as a pocket quarterback, then I would feel so secure in him because he's the anti-Wentz in terms of mental stability and in terms of how he views himself and his mistakes and how he learns. So I'm not out on Jalen Hurts. I think he'll have a very good year. I think he could have sort of a top 10 type season. And I think the Eagles could still move on, as crazy as that is, because if they want to do the same again, go and draft a rookie, then they get another 3 years on a rookie contract. And they think there's someone who could step in behind the great offensive line with A.J. Brown, with this receiving talent. It might be too hard to pass up. So as always, I've dragged it out. There are loads of factors that come into this in terms of where the Eagles pick, where the Saints pick. But I'll say 65% no. If someone held a gun to my head and said yes or no, I would just say no. But I'm not counting it out, that's for sure.
All right. And just to be clear here on the painted lines, we don't hold guns to anybody's heads, but I did get an exclusive prediction here out of Jonny. And I'm with you. Better chance he's not than he is. I do think there's a chance. I mean, he's gotten better year over year, going back to his time at Oklahoma even. He is the type of person that you want to be the face and the leader of your franchise. He has all the intangibles. He just needs to take that leap on the field. And I expect him to be better this year. I'm just not sure especially for an Eagles roster that has been very aggressive at the quarterback position. They were aggressive this offseason. It just didn't pan out. I'm very interested to see what this season holds, what the offseason holds. It's Jonny Page from Bleeding Green Nation here. Give him a follow on Twitter at Jonny Page 9. Jonny, before we get out of here, do you got any final thoughts that you want to get off your chest?
No, to be honest. I mean, I've been following you for a while. I'm sure everyone does because they're watching it, but go and check out all your stuff. As always, you're a very, very good follow. Except for that, not really. I think the Eagles will be good. I think it should be a fun year no matter what. I think that's the good thing. I think at times the Eagles have been boring the last few years at times when it seemed a bit predictable, especially the end of the Wentz era. So I think it'll be fun. I think no matter how this season goes, I don't think the wheels will come off. And I've said that now, so we're going to win about 6 games. But I think this will be a well-coached team. I think they've got enough good players to have a good season. And as a fan, that's all you can ask for in many ways. I think sort of worst case will be 9 or 10 wins, and that's if injuries strike and stuff. But I think it has the opportunity to be a really fun year for the Eagles. So fingers crossed.
All right. Well, you heard it here first. Thank you guys all for joining us for the inaugural episode of the Flyover. It will be on the Chalk Talk feed, focused solely on the Eagles every week. If you guys enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast. It really helps us out. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at _TPL. He is at Jonny Page 9. Be sure you check out his work on Bleeding Green Nation, especially his article he's got coming out about the defense here in the next week or two. So from me, from Jonny, from the Painted Lines, we will see you guys next time.